Hey everyone, I'm Charlie and this is the video version of my Constitution series. In school, we're never really forced to read the United States Constitution. We're told it's a beautiful document and they explain that it basically breaks down our three branches of government, but we're never expected to actually read the thing. It's like the Bible. You're supposed to understand the gist and memorize a few passages, but reading it from cover to cover is only for scholars and masochists. And most of us are only familiar with the very beginning. We the people and in the beginning. And the earlier bits of the more popular second acts, the Bill of Rights and the Gospel of the New Testament. That said, I'd like to analyze the Constitution further, but before I start reciting the preamble, I'd like to talk about how the document was created in the first place. The Constitutional Convention met in 1787, just a few years after the Articles of Confederation had been fully ratified, and likewise just a few years after the end of the Revolutionary War. Basically, a lot went on in the 1780s. It was a decade of self-discovery for our nation. The leaders of the day had to figure out what sort of country the United States would be. The Constitutional Convention officially began May 14, 1787. However, getting around was rough back then, and only a few delegates had arrived by that time. That should give you an idea of how important this convention was to the people of the time. They were in no hurry to get there. The convention couldn't really begin until at least half the states were represented, which wasn't until May 25th. Other state delegates trickled in slowly in the following weeks. New Hampshire delegates didn't show up until late July, and Rhode Island delegates never showed up at all. Originally, the Constitutional Convention was only supposed to spruce up the Articles of Confederation. The Articles only barely tied the states together, which was how some people liked it. In fact, that's why some delegates, such as New York's John Lansing Jr. and Robert Yates, showed up at all. If the Articles were to be amended, New York wanted to make sure they weren't changed too much. However, some delegates, particularly James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, came to the convention with the intention of starting from scratch, to create a new government that would replace the Articles altogether. Several delegates left immediately when it became obvious that the Articles of Confederation were being ditched. In short, they thought the whole business was a huge overreach of what was supposed to be a simple exploratory committee. New York delegates Lansing and Yates abandoned the convention in late July, leaving Alexander Hamilton alone and giving up New York's vote in the proceedings, which is why the Constitution is said to have been written by 11 states and Colonel Hamilton. Creating a republic is not easy. At the time, almost everyone had their own ideas for how the country should function. The Articles, for instance, mostly left the states to themselves and granted almost no power whatsoever to the national government. Basically, each state was its own country, and their citizens thought of themselves as citizens of their individual states, not as Americans. Collectively, they were merely a loose confederation of states, the embodiment of states' rights. However, that proved to be problematic on many levels, hence the convention. Alexander Hamilton proposed the opposite of a loose confederation, to eliminate individual states altogether and create one single country with a bilateral legislature and an executive that served for life once elected. However, this plan was deemed too British and was scrapped. After all, an elected king was still a king. James Madison came to the convention with a blueprint for a new government almost ready to go. This Virginia plan was heavily debated, but the gist of it basically stuck. 3 branches of government with a bicameral legislature. Madison didn't include many details, and most of the ones he did were thrown out, such as his focus on having both houses of the legislature represented proportionate to state populations. He was certainly upset at having his work ripped apart and rebuilt into something almost unrecognizable, but that didn't stop him from fighting hard to have the Constitution ratified once the convention was over. The Constitutional Convention debated for months. Should we have 1 executive or 3? 1 legislative body or 2? Should they be proportionate to state populations or static? When calculating populations, do you count slaves? And in a country ostensibly founded on the concept of freedom, could we abide slavery as an institution? The South disagreed with the North, big states disagreed with small states, and nationalists disagreed with anti-nationalists. As time went on, though, all these groups, forced together in small rooms, eventually found compromise. There would be 1 executive with limited terms and a chance to be re-elected. There would be 2 legislative bodies, 1 with proportionate members, 1 with static members. Slaves counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of determining a state's population for representation in the House of Representatives. And yes, slaves were acceptable. For now. A draft was written, the details were debated again, and then it was edited, debated, re-edited, until finally everyone just wanted to go home. Even at the end, though, several delegates were clamoring for a Bill of Rights to amend the document and refused to sign it until they were assured one was forthcoming. and it came 2 years later. Creating a document that forms the foundation of a country is not a task to be taken lightly. Another country couldn't simply take ours and use it as their own, as the details of the document are specific to the concerns of our country. It's the result of countless compromises, and nobody left the convention entirely satisfied with the thing. The Constitution of the United States is brilliant, but faulty. The Founding Fathers might even laugh if they knew we referred to it with such reverence today. After all, they had no problems throwing out their previous governing document when it became a problem. That's how we got the Constitution in the first place. And in the end, it was just the best they could come up with after 4 months of debate. It was just good enough so they could go home and get out of Philadelphia. Even so, with just a few amendments here and there, it was good enough to hold our country together for over 200 years and counting. I'll leave you with this quote from a speech written by Benjamin Franklin at the end of the proceedings. "I doubt, too, whether any other convention we can obtain may be able to make a better constitution. For when you assemble a number of men to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. From such an assembly can a perfect production be expected? It therefore astonishes me, sir, to find this system approaching so near to perfection as it does. And I think it will astonish our enemies, who are waiting with confidence to hear that our counsels are confounded like those of the builders of Babel, and that our states are on the point of separation only to meet hereafter for the purpose of cutting one another's throats. Thus I consent, sir, to this Constitution, because I expect no better, and because I am not sure that it is not the best." Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.